They can't outrun facts. They can't hide behind slogans forever. And today, we're shredding the spin. Stay with me, this one's wild. Pam Bondi didn't waste a second. Within hours of being sworn in, Trump's loyalists turned the Department of Justice into a weapon of political vengeance. This isn't law enforcement. It's authoritarianism in action.
Madam President, last week Pam Bondi was sworn in as the highest law enforcement officer in the United States of America. She is now the United States Attorney General. Unfortunately, as many of us feared, Attorney General Bondi took immediate steps to undermine the integrity of the Department of Justice. President Trump, after Bondi was confirmed, even said, quote, "I know I'm supposed to say she's going to be totally impartial with respect to Democrats. I'm not sure if there's a possibility of totally," unquote, President Trump. On day one in office, Attorney General Bondi created a so-called weaponization working group, a task force to investigate, quote, "the activities of all departments and agencies exercising civil or criminal enforcement authority over the last 4 years." Bondi said that she would, quote, "investigate the investigators," and, quote, "prosecute the prosecutors." And now she's doing exactly that, to seek the, quote, "retribution against political enemies, real and perceived, that President Trump has repeatedly threatened. I wish I could say I'm surprised by Attorney General Bondi's actions, but last week I stood at this very spot, sounding the alarm just before her confirmation vote. The writing was on the wall. Attorney General Bondi has made it clear that her foremost loyalty is to one person, President Trump. And she kept her promise on day one after being sworn into office by Associate Justice Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court. Bondi's directive is only one step in misusing the powers of government to carry out President Trump's retribution against those he perceives to be his enemies, and the list is long. Even before Attorney General Bondi was confirmed, the Trump administration purged dozens of senior career law enforcement officials at the Department of Justice and the FBI. Many of these senior officials are reportedly being reassigned to immigration cases for which they have little or no expertise. Last week, FBI law enforcement personnel across the country had little over 48 hours to answer a survey about their work on any case related to the January 6th attack in the Capitol, including whether they handled arrests, led operations, testified in trials, and more. Consider this for a moment. I don't know if you were here, Madam President, on that day, but those of us who were will never forget it. An insurrectionist mob left a rally for President Trump and came to Capitol Hill, crashed down the doors and windows, invaded the Capitol, started beating up on the Capitol Hill police. The net result, 4 policemen died. 140 were seriously injured. They took control of the United States Senate chamber and the House chamber and went through their antics posing for pictures sitting in the chair that you're sitting in. They went through my desk and other desks too. It was their day. These so-called tourists, so-called political prisoners. I've said on the floor before, and I've thought about this many times, if we were told that in the House of Parliament in London that a mob had beaten down the wooden door and taken control of the House of Commons, what would have been the reaction in the United States? First, incredulous. That can't happen. England's a powerful nation. It's got a rich history. A mob took over Parliament. That is exactly what happened on January 6th. A mob took over the Congress of the United States, invaded the Capitol building like the British in the War of 1812, and forced control at the expense of a lot of people who were prepared to die to defend us that day. That was a horrible incident. It was a horrible chapter in American history. And now the Trump administration is setting out to erase that history. The Soviet revisionists would look at this with some pride, to think that politicians in America are engaging in the same historical rewrite that they did for so many decades. And this rewrite is to erase January 6th as a reality, to whitewash it, to describe it as something that it isn't. How they'll ever overcome the hours and hours of videotapes which verify exactly what happened that day, I don't know. But they're going to start by cleansing the ranks of those in law enforcement who had anything to do with the 1,600 criminal defendants who were charged because of that day. Apparently, they want a disclosure of these names, of all those who took the assignment given them in the Department of Justice or the FBI to investigate that crime of January 6th. At the FBI, at least 6 FBI executive assistant directors have been removed, including those who oversaw the National Security Branch, the Intelligence Branch, and the Criminal Cyber Response and Services Branch. The Trump administration has removed the special agent in charge in at least 4 major field offices and the assistant director of the Washington field office. The acting attorney general has also issued a memo firing a dozen career Department of Justice prosecutors, and she was quoted as saying, "Given your significant role in prosecuting the president, I do not believe the leadership of the department can trust you in implementing the president's agenda faithfully." The Bureau's acting leaders are career public servants who have reportedly resisted the push from Trump administration officials to punish FBI agents who were simply doing their work and were assigned to investigate the January 6th attack. It was I'm not mistaken, it was the largest criminal prosecution in history. And to think that many assistant attorneys general and members of the FBI were in some role in its pursuit is no surprise whatsoever. So now the Trump administration wants these people to be outed, publicly disclosed, names and addresses. This weekend, the Bureau turned over the personnel details of thousands of FBI personnel. Thankfully, a temporary court order was issued on Friday that is keeping the Department of Justice from revealing those names. Is there any danger to these women and men who swore allegiance to the United States and its Constitution and pursued the official duties of the Department of Justice? Why, of course there is. The previous head of the FBI told us that the situation is grim when it comes to domestic terrorism in the United States. So is he suggesting that perhaps the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers can't wait to get this list the Trump administration's produced? A list of those who did their duty under the Constitution and pursued these cases on the January 6th outrage. I'm afraid that's a fact. That temporary court order is the only thing between these white nationalist extremist groups and the men and women who dedicated their lives to law enforcement in this country. That's where we've come to in just a few short days of the new Trump administration. Tomorrow, FBI probationary agents and personnel stationed around the world are required to submit justification for their continued employment. This could lead to firing up to 3,000 federal law enforcement officials. Don't tell me you want to fight crime. Don't tell me you want to stop narcotics and then dismiss 3,000 FBI and Department of Justice officials. These mass layoffs, forced retirements, and involuntary reassignments of experienced Department of Justice and FBI officials represent an outright attack on public safety by President Trump. America will be less safe because of this political charade that's going on in the Department of Justice. These mass layoffs of these experienced people mean that your family, your town, your neighborhood will be less safe. The purge is already leading to widespread disruption and delay in prosecutions, investigations, and sensitive operations. The Joint Terrorism Task Force have been asked to focus on President Trump's immigration-related initiatives, which means valuable resources and personnel have been shifted away from state, local, and federal partners fighting foreign and domestic terrorism. As America faces a heightened threat landscape, these removals and reassignments are crippling not only to the Justice Department and the FBI, but the 93 U.S. Attorney's Office and the 55 FBI field offices across the country. The loss of potentially thousands of federal law enforcement jobs will put a burden on local field offices, slow ongoing casework, increase the unemployment rates nationwide of law enforcement, and harm local economies. President Trump may claim to back the blue. He may pose with men and women in law enforcement, but apparently he's only interested in doing so when it's politically convenient and consistent with his political agenda. Before Ms. Bondi's confirmation, my concerns about how she would lead the department were based on her history as President Trump's personal lawyer. But the leadership of Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, is no longer hypothetical. Her directives and actions are now impacting a lot of innocent people and a lot of good Americans who dedicated their lives to public service and law enforcement. We need to work together on a bipartisan basis to push back against these attacks on the Department of Justice and FBI to protect the national security of the United States. Madam President, I'll take the floor in a day or two to describe what's going to happen next when it comes to Kash Patel, a man who has no experience which merits his selection as director of the FBI. He has the temperament of a politician who's stalking his opponents. Don't make that up. I just basically read his book, and it spells it out in details, including his infamous enemies list of some 60 people that he considers to be part of the deep state or whatever his characterization may be. To give this man a 10-year tenure as director of the FBI and the power of that agency with thousands of investigators and individuals is to invite trouble for this generation and the next. He's going to do things in that position which are not consistent with the values that people at the FBI have brought to that work for more than 7 or 8 decades. And that's why it's very important we watch it carefully. Madam President, I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of quorum.
Let's stop pretending this is normal. Let's stop pretending this is democracy. What we just witnessed is the hijacking of the Department of Justice, and Pam Bondi is the willing executioner of Donald Trump's revenge agenda. This isn't about restoring law and order. This is about punishing enemies, and the list, it's growing by the hour. Let's walk through it. Attorney General Bondi created a so-called weaponization working group to investigate the investigators and prosecute the prosecutors. This is not subtle. This is Trump and Bondi resurrecting the worst instincts of Nixonian paranoia and turbocharging it with MAGA vengeance. You want to know what weaponization of government really looks like? Look no further than this Orwellian task force, designed not to fight crime, not to defend the Constitution, but to hunt down anyone who dared to hold Trump accountable. Think about the sheer gall it takes to punish prosecutors who dared to do their jobs. Think about the open declaration of war on justice that's embedded in that mission. Prosecute the prosecutors. That's the language of dictators. That's how Putin operates. That's how Orban operates. And now, with Pam Bondi pulling the strings at DOJ, it's how the Trump administration operates too. And then there's this gem. President Trump said, I know I'm supposed to say she's going to be impartial with Democrats. I'm not sure if that's a possibility. Are you kidding me? This isn't just a red flag. It's a 5-alarm fire. The president openly admits that the Attorney General of the United States, the top law enforcement official in the country, won't be impartial. And instead of outrage, the GOP cheers. Let's be clear. Impartiality isn't a suggestion. It's a requirement. Without it, we don't have a justice system. We have a mafia. And Bondi? She's not the sheriff. She's the capo. Now let's talk about the January 6th purge. Bondi's DOJ gave FBI officials 48 hours to disclose their involvement in January 6th cases, including arrests, testimony, and trial operations. These are the people who defended democracy, who pursued over 1,600 criminal charges against insurrectionists, who risked their careers and their safety to uphold the rule of law. And what's their reward? Retribution, reassignment, surveys and loyalty tests that reek of fascist purges. FBI leaders removed, prosecutors fired, law enforcement officials reassigned to immigration cases they're unqualified for. Let's be blunt. This is a political cleansing. It is the systematic dismantling of the very people and institutions that dared to stand up to Trump's coup attempt. And it's not just immoral, it's lethal. Because every experienced FBI agent you fire, that's one less expert tracking terrorists. Every DOJ prosecutor you sideline, that's one more cartel kingpin walking free. And now, as if they weren't already playing with fire, they want the names and addresses of these public servants handed over. Let that sink in. They want to publish a list, a target list, of the very men and women who investigated January 6th. In a country where armed white nationalists are already looking for blood, they want to hang a neon sign over the homes of law enforcement. This is how authoritarian regimes operate. They don't just erase history, they hunt down the historians. And while this purge is underway, Bondi's DOJ is gutting the very core of the Bureau. 6 top FBI assistant directors gone, major field offices decapitated. The Washington field office, which led the January 6th prosecutions, neutralized. The message is chilling. If you enforce the law against Trump, you're the one who gets investigated. And let's not overlook the scale of the damage. Up to 3,000 federal law enforcement officials could be fired. That's not reform. That's sabotage. That's like claiming you want to fight crime, then torching the police department. But of course, they don't care about crime. They care about control. Because as long as Pam Bondi sits atop the DOJ, this is no longer a Department of Justice. It's a Department of Vengeance. And it gets worse. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, the unit charged with stopping attacks from actual terrorists, is now being redirected to chase down immigrants for Trump's xenophobic agenda. Let me say that again. In a moment where domestic terrorism is the #1 security threat facing our country, where the FBI has repeatedly warned about far-right violence, the Trump administration is yanking those agents off anti-terror missions and pointing them toward political optics. This is sabotage disguised as policy. This is how democracies die, not with tanks in the street, but with hand-picked loyalists hollowing out institutions from within. And Bondi is leading the charge. Let's not forget who she is. This is the woman who acted as Trump's personal impeachment defender, the one who used her office to shield him from investigation, the one who took $25,000 from his corrupt foundation, and then dropped a case against Trump University. You don't put someone like that in charge of justice unless you're trying to destroy justice. And finally, there's this. We need to work together on a bipartisan basis to protect the DOJ and FBI. That would be nice, but let's be honest. We can't work with a party that's complicit in this attack. We can't partner with people who voted to confirm Bondi knowing full well what she would do. We need to call this what it is, a criminal conspiracy to erase the truth, punish the patriots, and fortify the grip of authoritarianism. This is not hypothetical. This is not political theater. This is a full-blown assault on the rule of law carried out by a regime that views justice as an obstacle, not a principle. Pam Bondi is not just unfit. She is dangerous. She is Trump's blunt instrument, shredding independence, purging truth-tellers, and bulldozing over decades of constitutional norms. The DOJ is being transformed, not into a guardian of the people, but into a revenge machine aimed at anyone who dared to expose the crimes of the last administration. Prosecutors, agents, public servants, all being swept out in a purge that should send chills down the spine of every American who still believes in democracy. And let's be absolutely clear, this was the plan all along. Trump didn't hide it. He said it out loud. I am your retribution. And now, through Bondi, he's following through. The FBI isn't being reformed. It's being cleansed. The DOJ isn't being restored. It's being weaponized against the Constitution itself. This is the MAGA endgame. Control every lever of power, silence every critic, punish every act of accountability, and the only thing standing in their way, United States. We cannot look away. We cannot normalize this. We must fight it with truth, with facts, and with fury. If you're as outraged as I am, don't stay silent. Share this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. We need every voice in this fight, because if we let them erase January 6th, they'll erase everything. Let's make damn sure justice doesn't go down without a fight.